Hi, this is Omar Khalifa. I'm the CEO of iAccelerate, and welcome to another and a very special edition of iAccelerate Remote. So we've been speaking to a number of our startups over the last few weeks, and we'll be returning to that. But today is World Earth Day 2020, a really interesting opportunity for us to maybe reflect how we actually fit into this environment that we're now finding ourselves in. Too often, maybe we've thought that we should beat nature into submission and somehow we'll overpower it and figure out how to or make it work for us. I think if nothing else, the coronavirus has taught us that we are much better off if we begin to understand better how we work within the world we have and what we do. So today we've invited two very special guests to walk us through some of the things and initiatives that are going on in the business world about sustainability on a day like today. So I have Belinda Gibbons from the Sydney Business School, and I also have Kevin McDonald, who's going to talk to us about how his company is advising people about sustainable development investment. So I'll just hand it over to each of you to maybe introduce yourself a little bit more completely, and then we'll start asking some questions about how we're going about these things. Belinda?
Thanks, Omar. Hello, everyone. As Omar mentioned, I'm an academic within the Sydney Business School at the University of Wollongong, and I also have the privilege of being an expert in residence in iAccelerate in regards to the area around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I guess the biggest question that comes out at the moment is, what are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? And in September 2015, 193 member states signed Agenda 2030. And Agenda 2030 comprises of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And those goals are around eliminating poverty, protecting our planet, and providing the opportunity for everyone to live in a peaceful and prosperous world. And at this point in time, asking ourselves as we look out our window each day and as we take our walk that we're allowed to take, just how important our environment and how important nature is to us. The earth is a provider of all life and all knowledge, and so we can't help to relate the Sustainable Development Goals and have a discussion about them on Earth Day.
Thanks, Belinda, for that introduction. And Kevin, if you also could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kevin McDonald. My business is Future Focused Financial Planning. I'm a financial advisor that works on the Innovation Campus. Our business is in smart space in the serviced offices, which are provided by the University of Wollongong. When it comes to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we use it as a framework to help our clients uncover what's important to them, to their family, and help them make sure that the way their superannuation is invested, the way their other investments are placed, are supporting rather than harming the future that they want. And that's quite a personal thing. And the framework of the development goals is something that people can relate to, and we help them sort of go through and prioritize which ones stand out for them, because everyone really is different, and the advice we provide is personalized to the people we're working with to help them find the right path.
So that's great, Kevin. Thank you. And we'll get back to some of those questions that people may have about how they go about doing that. It's clear that for a very long time, I've been working on some of the fringes of sustainability in business, since the 1990s. And it seems to be fits and starts of, people applying themselves and saying, yes, we must do something. And then it seems like we then sort of come back, and then we push forward a little bit more, and then we come back again. And it looks like we've been in this endless cycle now for decades about making progress and then denying ourselves that what we've assumed previously as being given. Again, how does business maybe now get some traction that doesn't give up?
I guess in aligning with what Kevin mentioned, the Sustainable Development Goals give you a framework that enable you to have a particular discussion or to see a particular issue through a very holistic and systemic lens. And I think that's what's quite different about them. They're not giving you an answer to something, they're just providing you with a framework to use in having a very global plus local conversation in these areas.
So Belinda, do you see this as a new intersection where different people, whether they're in a scientific field or in community development or social side or businesses, can all begin to speak the same language about development and sustainability?
Yeah, definitely, Omar. I think it's probably the first time that we've truly had a global language through which we can have a discussion. The difference with the Sustainable Development Goals is that they cross all countries and all sectors. And in particular, the business sector. So the private sector doesn't usually have a lot of input or conversation around a lot of things to do with the United Nations. Whereas, this is bringing them up into the forefront of the resources they're using and the decisions they're making, and to enable collaborations and partnerships to make those decisions.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that is something that we really haven't had before. So it's interesting to see how that develops. Kevin, coming to you, I mean, we're talking about this new language. Does that language make it more approachable for your clients to begin to understand how they can help make a difference, or what their opportunities are and how they behave in their investments choices they make?
I do think so, Emma. I think, as Belinda mentioned, it's bringing these ideas to the forefront of people's minds. There's a lot more promotion. We're seeing them in a lot of different spheres. And clients that we're meeting with today, when we sit down and we bring up the Sustainable Development Goals and talk through them, they're often graphics that people do recognise through different things in their community or through council or even the businesses and organisations that they work with. We are finding that so many of the people we work with want to do something to improve the future, and so many people make personal sacrifices to do that. But not too many people really understand the fact we all have this pool of money in superannuation that can be achieving a strong retirement outcome while also investing in a better future through fund managers that focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, which is something that we're seeing a lot more fund managers really start to consider in their analysis of companies.
Yeah, that's interesting that there's some awareness and now getting common language to begin to talk about that. Belinda, there's a number of Sustainable Development Goals, right? So, I mean, it's not like we're just talking about preserving forests or the ocean. We're talking about really a whole new set of thinking about things in the entirety. Can you talk to us about some of those that are maybe not what would have been traditionally thought of as sustainable goals or environmental goals?
Affordable and clean energy is another goal, and we know Australia has some of the highest prices of energy in the world. So that one is one that companies and businesses and all different sectors are looking at. Sustainable cities and communities, thinking about our transportation, responsible consumption and production. Australia has the highest material consumption of all OECD countries. And so that's something we really need to look at, and from an individual perspective, but also from an organisation and business perspective. So there's these beautiful set of goals that cover, all these conversations and themes that we need to talk about. And not all companies, you can't ask everyone to focus on all 17 at once. So they are just choosing the ones that closely aligning with their value proposition. But as Kevin mentioned earlier, we're looking for also opportunities. So starting new opportunities, which is extremely important for startups. I think it's a really exciting space.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's that sense of, that startups can start from a different foundation to other companies and maybe align earlier. Kevin, the COVID-19 has obviously changed the conversations for everyone, everywhere, on everything. How do you think it's going to change the conversations people will be having with you in regarding maybe their investment decisions or decisions about
There's a few trends emerging and a few things that we've seen already. So of the trends that are emerging for people personally, we're seeing that the time at home, all this extra time that people now have with their family, they're starting to think about the future and starting to think, how do they want to, well, more so what's important to them, really considering what actually means something to them when so much has been stripped away from their day-to-day lives. We're seeing that people are taking this time to reach out to financial advisors and to start getting a move on when it comes to some of those life admin tasks. Sometimes that's financial planning, sometimes it's just weeding the garden, but a lot of people are finding time for things that they've really put off. From our world as advisors, we're seeing that of the investments that take that approach of sustainability, embed the UN SDGs, embedding them properly, we've seen that they're quite stable over the recent period because there's quite a bit more money invested into health and technology. I think the most concerning is, from a financial point of view, personally, the ability to take money out of super at the moment for eligible people, 10,000 or 20,000 if you're using both financial years. For someone that's retiring in 20 years, the fact that the market's as low as it is, and that over time your investments do compound as they grow, $20,000 out now in 20 years can be over 100 grand less for retirement. And when we're looking at people that have a 30-year time frame to retirement, that figure's double. It's in the 200,000 range. And so if you're invested in a way that's focused on the sustainability and using the UN SDGs, you're finding that many of those investments aren't quite falling as far, which means that the recovery is not going to be as long for certain people.
Do you think people's timing horizons will have changed as a result of what we're going through now? I mean, the short-termism of, buying and selling and getting into businesses and getting out of them and so forth. Do you think fundamentally that when we come out of all of this, that will change, that people might be a bit more sort of think through that? I mean, that might not be good for all financial advisors. It might make a lot of money out of people going in and out of different investments. But do you think our horizon is a key aspect of this? Belinda, maybe you first with thinking it through for businesses and how business might react.
So I think if you look at innovation at the moment, it's moving at a rapid pace over the last couple of months out of necessity. And as we see, ideas and manufacturing and production coming back to Australia, and companies modifying their ideas and becoming quite creative and trying to think outside the box, and behavioural changes and mind shift changes, and that's happening. You can see those stories everywhere. So it will be quite interesting as whatever our exit strategy is for this pandemic, is that we keep that mind shift, and that bureaucracy is not necessarily there. So I think that will be interesting.
And Kevin, so some people think, it's a snap back. That terminology has been used, that once this is all over, we'll snap back. And it seems to me it's the elasticity of things. They'll just go back to the way they were, because that was great. But it sounds like maybe that's not the way it's going to be, because it's hardly ever the way things are. Things do end up moving on for a lot of reasons, but things will never be the same again, because we'll have a history that will be different than the history we would have had a year ago. How do you anticipate people will be now looking not only at their investments, but also what's important? Do you sense that they're going to be asking you different questions, and how will you be prepared to respond to those questions?
I think every time there's a big market downturn, like we saw in the global financial crisis, people do take lessons from those, especially ones that have gone through those periods with a financial advisor providing some guidance along the way. I don't think this is a period that will necessarily change fund managers moving in and out of investments. But I do think everyday Australians are more likely to realise that the markets do eventually recover, because the people who lost big during the global financial crisis are the ones that converted their money into cash and made decisions based on fear, rather than what we're seeing more of now, and which is people prepared to sort of wait it out. I don't think we're going to get straight back to normal. From an economic point of view, markets are factoring in that this will take a while. We're not going to hit a bottom and then go back to where we were necessarily. Yeah, I think people's attitudes towards investing is going to be affected by something like this, seeing that there is no certainty in returns. We've had almost 12 years of markets rising now since the global financial crisis, and people have started getting a bit greedy in the way that they allocate money and allocate funds. We're seeing some of the larger super funds really struggle through this period because they've based their decisions on the history of recent decades rather than the longer term. As Belinda's touched on, business is going to change over time. We're going to have to adapt faster and faster as climate change has a even greater material impact on the way companies do business, the way governments direct funds. I think all of these things will combine to show us that if we're not investing in companies that have these things in mind, then while there may be some short-term gains, long-term, that will be the ones missing out.
Yeah, well, I think that's very true. And I think just to bring this to wrapping it up, and I think that was a very good summary there, Kevin, and also Belinda, thinking through, how this will fundamentally change things. And at first, the reaction may be, let's just go back to the way we were, and in particular for companies that are just starting out, for them to not to just think, this just passed and we just go back, but to take advantage of what's really around us now. And the Sustainable Development Goals is a structure, it is a language that can be used to guide companies and to actually help guide their innovation as much as thinking about their responsibility. And our commitment, and the commitment we're making at iAccelerate, is that every one of the businesses that goes through our startup program here, and we have over 60 of them in-house currently, will be asked to, and in fact required to, produce their Sustainable Development Goal report card. And we hope that we make that as an annual thing. For every time they do their books, they will actually do their SDG evaluation also about how they're tracking against the goals that they decided were important to them and the ones that they may want to identify to their customers. I encourage everyone who's not familiar with Sustainable Development Goals today on this Earth Day to look them up and begin to get familiar with them and begin to think about how they may influence or should influence how you make decisions, whether it's personal decisions in your own investments or as a person in business who might be thinking about, how do I guide my business into this future now that we have so many more uncertainties apparently than we've ever had before. So that's from us, iAccelerate Remote. And thank you, Belinda. Thank you, Kevin, for your contribution on helping us understand this.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on iAccelerate Remote.